Don? Jesse? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Rebecca. I know that Diani emailed in some additions, which I guess we could speak about when we get to correspondence.
I might have put them in the agenda.
Okay.
There was one part I added on the Lake Revival Grant and something about discussing the name of the parks. Is there something other than that?
No.
Okay. Don, do you have any additions, deletions, or corrections?
No. No.
Okay, then it will stand. Any persons present not on the agenda? You have 3 minutes to speak per speaker.
Madam Vice Chair, I registered to speak.
Yes,
yesterday
Dick.
afternoon.
Okay,
I should be on the list there.
then Matt, let's begin.
Much of tonight's agenda is talk about PRT projects.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, which is good. That's great. With a list for 2021. I'd like to point out there is already a very extensive list at Parks, Recreation and Trails of Parks, Recreation and Trails projects in the approved Green Mountain Falls Comprehensive Plan. The comprehensive plan is on the town website under Government Planning Commission /comp plan, pages 101 and 104. So if you'll keep that in mind, there are some really important projects in there that you should put on the list that you're going to form. Number 2, I am opposed to any form of paid parking, although the income might be very desirable. The devil is in the details. Talking around town, I can't find any support for parking, especially the businessmen don't think it's a good idea. The devil is in the details. The administration of a parking fee system could exceed the income, the cost of administering it. And has it been thought through who would enforce the parking fees? Our marshal's department is understaffed. And I would recommend that parking on public land should stay under the current policy, first come, first served. If you try to sort out the people pulling into a parking space and determine whether their kids going to the swimming pool, or people going to Sally Bush, or people out for a hike, or people just finding a place to park, how are you going to make all those kinds of people, including residents, pay a fee? And I know there's talk about having a hang tag or something, or issuing passes to people, but that's going to take a lot of time and administration. People coming in and out of town all summer long. So I don't think it's been thoroughly thought out. I'm looking forward to the briefing tonight to find out if some of these devils in the details and the devilish details have been addressed. Thank you.
Anybody else? Matt, is anybody else signed up to speak?
Not that I'm aware of. But if there was anybody who wanted to speak,
then
now's
we will.
the time.
Yes. I'm more than welcome to accepting any speeches. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. From the meeting minute, the regular meeting held on November 4th, are there any changes or additions? No? Okay, then, does anybody want to approve? Jesse, Don?
Madam Chairman, I move the minutes be approved.
I'll second. I think we're
Thank you,
approving the
Don.
consent agenda.
Okay. Okay, Matt, do we have the John Kane on board to give us his talk, or are we just ahead of time?
I think we're not ahead of time. I just think he's running behind. So in correspondence with you, I had said that he actually is coming from his planning commission meeting, so he gets to double dip tonight. But I don't know exactly when that will end, and he's not planning, from what I understand, to attend the entire meeting, just a portion of the meeting. And so we're 11 minutes in, and I think he's still in his meeting, would be my guess. We could move forward with more portions of the agenda and save it for later if that's to your liking.
Okay. Yes, I would like that. Would you like to discuss number 6, the Memorial Park bench information you uncovered today?
Certainly. So I learned more about benches than I think I've ever learned ever. The code here, so I came from a community on the Northeast in the Plains called Brush. And so I'm very familiar with their planning commission. We have been working on a large scale housing development before I left. And I think we have more pages dedicated to benches in our code than we have for like piping. Nah, I kid. But anyway, to get away from levity for this evening, I think this project was presented to Angie via email. Miss Lana, I believe is her name, Fox, sent an email in asking if it would be possible to place a memorial bench for her son, Chad, who passed away this last year. She gave some specifics about the bench, like the type of material it would be, and some plans around the bench, including a solar-powered lamp. And it's a really fascinating project, but after spending a long time with the code today, it's not something that's necessarily in the PRT's purview in terms of approval. According to our code, Chapter 18, Article 3, Section 1874, it specifically addresses benches as an acceptable surface use for public property. And that makes them subject to the revocable permit process, which I don't know everybody's familiarity with the revocable permit process in Green Mountain Falls, but it's sort of convoluted at times. And I think this is a particular situation where it might be convoluted again. So like I said, the PRT committee, we don't approve or disapprove this project at all. Under the same section, 1874 subsection D, it actually states that construction or installation of a new device or structure on the surface of public property is at the direction of the planning commission or its designated representative, in this case, Julia, the town planner. Ultimately, the planning commission would review this anyway. And benches are explicitly listed again as a acceptable surface use. And so I think there's some things to consider. Ms. Fox stated she would pay for the entirety of the project. So the installation of the memorial bench and the solar lamp and whatever fees and costs come with that process. But I think I was trying to come up with a way, and I don't know exactly how this will work out, but in the spirit of this particular project, it's a memorial bench, can we find a way to either waive fees or find a process that lessens the fees or minimizes the amount of impact from a yearly revocable permit on something that is effectively a donation to the town? And so that's where we don't even come in and deal with any of these things. This would solely go to the discretion of the Planning Commission. And with that in mind, the Planning Commission can make whatever recommendation they want. But for this evening, my staff recommendation is to support the project and forward it on to the Planning Commission to review for their own decisions on what it should cost, and leave that up to what our code says. But that doesn't mean we can't support the project. We're Parks, Rec, and Trails. She wants to build the bench in a park. So that still should fall with our support. And so if this is something that we're interested in going forward, I would invite Lana back to interact with us. But so far, she hasn't submitted plans. She hasn't submitted drawings. She hasn't really done a lot more than start to conceptualize. And so I'm more than happy to help make this a reality. And I'm sure everybody here feels a very similar feeling. But we want to make sure it's going through the correct processes. So that's I think where we are with the bench.
Okay. Where am I? Start video. So it looks like we can forward this on to the Planning Commission with a recommendation that we think it's a good idea, we don't think it's a good idea, to waive the fees, but essentially it is not our decision. Do you guys have any other input on this?
I'm in support of the project. I agree fully with passing it to the Planning Commission. I hope there's a way that she could donate the bench to the town so that it's not done under a revocable permit. That would be one way to get around that. But I am in support of it, and I do wonder, I do hope that the Planning Commission will think about the type of benches that we already have in town, and the overall aesthetic, and just making sure that the aesthetics meet that of the rest of the town.
Right. Those are good ideas. Don, any input?
I'm going to have to abstain on this issue just because I don't have enough information. And honestly, I'm a little bit confused after hearing Matt explain the process. So I wouldn't feel right, advocating for this concept, not knowing exactly what it is.
Okay.
Was there anything that I could clarify? I'm learning about the revocable permit process at the same time that I'm sharing this information with you guys.
Well,
And
that's,
so
I
I'd be
think
happy
that's
to clarify.
I mean, obviously you earned your pay tonight because that's an important part of our code that we need to understand, so that if it does come in, is it revocable or irrevocable? And that's an important matter to understand, and probably she needs to understand that as well.
Definitely.
Matt, I have a question. Is there anything in the rules that say that the benches have to be the same as the ones that are presently there?
I think it's to the spirit for the Planning Commission is to maintain the aesthetic integrity. But looking through all the specifics of the revocable permit process for benches specifically, technically no, from what I can discover. Now there could be ordinances and resolutions that I haven't read off the top of my head, but based on the code that's on Municode online, benches aren't even really mentioned all that often specifically. So there's a process, from what I understand, where at some point in the future we may pursue a code rewrite, and I can totally understand why that is a project that's been floated around. Is our code can be a bit confusing, and it leaves out things that are common and includes things that are uncommon at times in my experience.
So Matt, is the Planning Commission just going to come back to us and say, this really seems like a matter for PRT because it's really a parks related issue?
They shouldn't. And if I attended the Planning Commission meeting and spoke on this, I would point out the sections of code that I pointed out to you guys and where it explicitly states that they're supposed to review this. Now, I think the question could come back to if they consider this revocable or irrevocable, and if this even falls under the permit process through their purview. Under code it does, but boards will act how they act. And so I can't always speak to how they'll respond to those interpretations and find a way to waive fees or permits or whatever other process they could come up with. But as far as I could tell, it's not in our purview. It's simply something where we could voice support for the project and go from there.
Okay, Don, would you be willing to support the general idea of the project and refer it to the Planning Commission to ultimately be the
Do we know
decision
what the-
maker?
Is the, how would you state the general idea? A bench, a stone bench, deslided?
So
Oh.
yeah, and I would say
Well, actually,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Matt.
In this case, pursuing the process of getting a bench placed. That's really the only thing that I would support from this if I was in your shoes from a staff perspective. Not even listing specific things, since it would be up to the Planning Commission in the first place, or you cannot do anything. It doesn't change that the potential applicant can just go pursue this with the Planning Commission. The difference would be having the support of the PRT committee would show value to the project. And that's why it's up to you guys, I think.
We do have other memorial benches in other parks, so I think we should support Lana Fox in her request to place a memorial bench and let the Planning Commission dictate the specifics.
On?
I'll go for that.
Did you say you would go for that?
Yeah, I support the concept. It's just, I'm not used to supporting concepts. I'm used to supporting, a design, a blueprint, something that's tangible that I'm looking at and know what I'm approving. So, but I'll go with you guys if you want to just approve the concept of place a memorial bench. Yes, I know it's been done all over town, and then just rely on the Planning Commission to make sure it meets all the other specs.
Okay, then I motion to refer this to the Planning Commission with the general idea of supporting her in general. That it's very non-specific because they're the ones that have to approve it.
A second.
Okay. Okay, Matt, I'm assuming that John Kane is still not available?
Oh, sorry. Last I heard, we only had a second. Did we vote?
I
Aye.
motioned.
Oh, I didn't hear it. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I must
Okay.
have not heard it.
Okay. So we're good? We're referring that to the Planning Commission.
Yes, just double checking, but yeah, we're good now.
Okay, good. Okay, let's start discussing projects. I sent an email out to everybody on the PRT committee and to Matt as well. I kind of tried to organize some of the recommendations that I received, some from Jesse and some from Clay and some from Diani. So if we could start addressing some of those now. Clay's list was pretty exhaustive, so I kind of combined things. But I would like to say if I left out anything important that you want to discuss, please let me know, okay? Don, Jesse, did you get the email I sent?
Yes, Rebecca, thank you.
What was the question?
Don, did you get an email from me? Kind of organizing committee projects?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Then, as you see, that it starts with, I had an overall list of 3 things. Then I had parks, recreation, and then trails, all under separate categories. Right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's begin with the overall list because they apply to the rest. They apply to PR and T. And overall, I have restrooms, porta-johns as 1. As 2, I have parkage and signage coordination. And as 3, I have directives from the Board of Trustees and the possibly the town manager regarding our goals. Would that be okay with you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that regardless of what we discuss following those 3 things, those have to be addressed for everything else. Correct? Is there any discussion you need to have about that?
No, I mean, I think that we should, I hope that we could at least put some dates out and make a recommendation that our public restrooms in the parks be open by a certain date, and have leadership begin to think of ways to get that, to make that happen.
Dates and how, and that would be the Board of Trustees, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so parking and signage coordination, I will defer until we hear from Mr. Kane. And the third was a suggestion from Jesse that I totally agree with, that we are just flailing around if we don't know what the Board of Trustees and town manager really expect from us and what they think that we're able to accomplish. Is that generally what you meant, Jesse?
That is, I think we spent some time trying to make a budget, and I don't know that we've been asked to make a budget or why we would have a budget. I
Correct.
believe that we should make recommendations for the Board of Trustees and let them move to approve them and exercise them as they can. I don't think it's really a good use of our time to try to make a budget. I think more specifically, if I'll use the example of the tennis courts, we were asked to get a bid to have the tennis courts striped for tennis and pickleball, and we turned that into the town manager. And I see us functioning in that way unless the board tells us otherwise.
Right. Don, you think that is along the line you're thinking?
I totally concur. I think it's a waste of time if we're trying to fill out, determine how to spend money that we're not in charge of.
Okay, so whatever we decide, those 3 things will definitely be on the must-have list, essentially, that we need their input.
Madam
Okay,
Chairman,
so let's move on to,
Madam Chairman,
yes,
May
Mr.
I-
Bratton,
make a suggestion. You're a
sir.
new committee. You haven't done this kind of work before as a group. The way we used to do it in the planning commission is first you make a list of all the projects you think would be desirable. And you make sure it's a comprehensive list that you thought of everything. You brainstorm it, you work it over the years, you carry over the list every year, you update it, and you have a list of projects to start with. The most important thing the committee does is advise the town board of trustees on the priorities of those projects. Which ones should be at the top of the list to seek funding for? And which ones can fall down to the bottom because they're not quite as important as the rest? That's the biggest thing you can do to help the board of trustees. So the first step is to make a
Thank you, Dick. That's
comprehensive-
exactly what we're doing.
well,
We're trying to do that tonight.
okay. So step one is
And
the list. You have to have a list of projects.
we got it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a list of projects.
I haven't seen that. Can you
It should
put that
be,
up? or-
there are a whole bunch of things that should be in the, attached to the agenda for tonight.
I read all of Clay's list of projects. There's some good ones and some not so good ones, but that is a list. So a lot of them are tiny, but that's okay.
And
It's a
there
good
are some
start.
things,
That's a good start. Now, if you combine
and I
that,
added,
with the list that's already in the comprehensive plan, you'll have a pretty doggone good list to start with.
Rebecca, I suggest that you go down our list
Okay.
that
No.
you have for parks.
sir. Thank you. The first thing I would like is to discuss the names of the parks that we have. Deani Liu asked for this as she's writing grants. She needs to be able to name the parks that we have in town. Now, we have is it called the Lake Park,
Gazebo Lake Park.
where the gazebo is? Gazebo Lake Park?
Mhm.
That's one. And what is the little park called where the flag flies?
I've heard that referred to as Flagpole Park, but I don't know if there's an official name besides that.
There is an
Okay.
official name. The person who's memorialized next to the flagpole, the park was called that for quite a while. I can't remember the name, Tucker or something like that. I think Clay named it, or Clay mentioned it in his write-up. So there is a name for a specific person for that park.
Okay. And what about the park by the swimming pool?
That's traditionally been called Pool Park, for lack of a better name.
Pooled Park. Okay. I'll figure out Clay's name for the flagpole park and get those. Are there any other parks I'm missing, by the way? I'm sorry.
Well, you got a little park down the corner of Hotel Street and Ute Pass Boulevard, Ute Pass Road. At the four-way stop,
Does it have a name? Right.
not that I know of.
Rebecca,
Sir?
the name you're looking for, I believe, is Emmett Peters Park.
Right.
There you go, that's it.
Emmett,
Emmett Peters. Thank you so much.
no extra charge.
You must be the geezer tonight.
I'm the geezer every night.
Okay, am I missing any parks now that we have that covered? No, okay.
I have a
Then
question.
let's move on to,
I have a
sir,
question.
Don,
Are we recommending
please.
or confirming names for these parks? What's the action here?
This is Deani. So I was the one who received that request, and
No,
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
So I was the one who had received that request, and the request was to ask you all for your recommendations about naming our parks. Again, I wasn't aware of the other names that may have been assigned historically. The email that I got from one of the other trustees was that Gazebo Lake Park was the only one that officially has a name. We could look into if that other one officially has that name, or if it's more colloquial. But the recommendation was that we get your input on specific names for parks so that we can designate them more clearly in our grants that we're writing.
So you're asking for our recommendation for official park names?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And someone had also, as a suggestion or an idea, offered up potentially Morgan Park in reference to John Morgan. Again, that was just something that was emailed to me, so I thought I would pass that along.
For which property?
Just as a general, in case names were being thrown around and being suggested.
That's the pool park, and a small portion of it next to the fenced-in pool is a memorial to John Morgan's deceased wife. To name the whole park, that would be extraordinary, I think.
Rebecca?
Okay, Deani, do you need anything else, sir?
Nothing else related to that particular topic. I just wanted to pass on that information to you guys.
Okay. Perhaps we can do some research to see if there are any names listed in past documents referencing these parks.
Yeah, I think anything that you could offer up would be a tremendous help to us.
Well, we want you to get your grant funded, which is the next topic on our list.
Rebecca?
Deani and Catherine have been working on the lake revival. Oh, I'm sorry, Don. Go ahead before we do this. Don?
I'm not sure what we're moving on to the next item, but I'm not sure what we did on the last item.
It was more informational. Deani's trying to write grants, but she needs a firm name for, I think, mostly the Gazebo Lake Park. But I would be more than happy to do some research and see if there are any other names for the other parks there. We don't have to really do anything, except I will do research if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would ask Deani if she is satisfied using Gazebo Lake Park, Emmett Peters Flagpole Park, and Green Mountain Falls Pool Park in her grant request.
If that is the recommendation, I will pass that along to Catherine as well.
I have to interject.
Don,
I have to
would you
interject.
like that?
I'm a little bit cold on Pool Park. I think we can come up with a better name if there's not already a name.
Okay.
I agree with you, Don. I think that we definitely could, and I think that probably involves like some surveys and some community input. I think for the purpose of filling out a grant request, we have to start somewhere because the grant request is due.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's time sensitive. Okay, so we're okay with those three names, even though we're not delighted with Pool Park. Okay, Deani, you good?
I'm good, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now Deani and Catherine are working on the Lake Revival grant, and that grant covers handicap parking or handicap fishing deck, repairing the lake wall, several things involving the pool and handicapped access. And so I think we need to defer discussing any of those items until the grant goes through. So I would just take those things off of our list right now. What do you guys think?
I would agree. I think if we get the grant, then we'll get a directive from the Board of Trustees through Deani.
I would agree.
Correct.
That sounds like a great process.
Okay. Okay. Next on the parks list is irrigation. And unfortunately, Clay isn't here, and he was the big irrigation system guy. It certainly has to be high on our list.
Yeah. What I know about that is that we don't have backflow preventers in several of the parks. So Colorado Springs Utilities won't turn on the meters there until we have those installed. I just had one of those installed down at Mountain Road Corner for the historic Green Mountain Falls Foundation Park there. And the cost of that for digging out the pit and having everything installed was right at $5,000. So I think that we could be helpful to the Board of Trustees by the next. I'm happy to reach out for some bids, so that we have bids available to give to the Board of Trustees, and maybe along with that bid, we could prioritize which park should get theirs next. So Gazebo Lake Park has their irrigation system on and functioning for the main lawns. So the pool park does not have irrigation on, and I think it's a shame personally driving through town to see Flagpole Park right in the heart of town with no green grass. So I would prioritize that one, or consider that. So I would like to take the responsibility to get some bids and forward those on to the Board of Trustees for backflow preventers to be installed. And if we could decide on a priority list tonight, we could pass that on to them as well.
Jesse, another question.
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Are these permanent installations, or are they, as winterized, or are they taken in and out on a seasonal basis?
Yeah, they're a permanent installation, and the backflow preventer basically winterize it when winter comes, and it prevents having ice damming form from a water meter. Which is why Colorado Springs Utilities is making us install those before they turn on the meters.
I'm surprised that they weren't initially required. Do you know why?
So they began requiring those about 3 years ago. There were several years that we didn't turn on any of the water meters in any of the irrigation systems in town due to the expense when Colorado Springs stopped paying for the water. That's my understanding. We turned the one on in Gazebo Lake Park after an art installation when we put down the new sod. And so we went to the expense, I believe, of having that one installed then. And I think the mayor even mentioned it last night during the trustee meeting that they had only been doing one a year due to the cost. I know over the past 3 years, I've had to put 3 of them in on historic properties.
Understood. This is a footnote, but do you know who regulates the actual irrigation systems on a daily basis?
Yeah, Public Works.
My little footnote here is I know that during the summer, the gazebo Gazebo Lake Park was not properly regulated. It'd be flooded in the morning by overwatering. I don't know, how we get our fingers around that one, but it's number one, it's a waste of resources. Number two, it's not very fun for the people that are using the park early in the morning to wade through puddles.
It probably would not be beyond our scope to recommend a watering schedule if someone wanted to research that, Don.
Okay. I will take that on if that's the scope of our committee.
I mean, I don't think that we're supposed, that we're managing it, but I do think that we should take the time to research and make recommendations and hope that someone's listening.
Well, I do have background in commercial irrigation, and so management's kind of a little my pet peeve, but I can let it go if I need to.
Dawn, if I have a vote, since you know about it, please, we can give them a recommendation.
And I could say for the trustees that, if you all are noticing specific problems with the parks and you have that expertise and knowledge, we definitely, would really value that information. And I'd be happy to pass that along and make sure the other trustees see it and make sure it gets on to the right people.
Sounds good.
Also, Dawn, I can recommend the kudos and concerns page on the Green Mountain Falls website. It gets very quick attention. So you can, at any time you see something wacko like that, you can say, hey, what's going on with the watering schedule?
Are you
Because
serious?
maybe they just don't know. I am serious, sir.
Okay.
I mean, I think we need to tell them when they're doing something right. And that does seem to work. Okay, so irrigation. Jesse is going to run with it, right?
I will get competitive bids. I would like for us to prioritize the parks tonight. That way I could send that on to the Board of Trustees also. So so in prioritizing,
Yes.
I feel like Flagpole Park would be my first choice for the next park to receive the backflow preventer. How do you guys feel?
It's good with me.
So I'm going to get some competitive bids then, Rebecca, if you're okay.
What did you
with
say
it.
after Flagpole Park? Please do. Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
Looking
And
at our
then-
list, this is a very high priority.
So
Rebecca,
I'll get the bids and make a recommendation, and then Don will make a recommended watering schedule as a recommendation also.
that's a little easier said than done. I would even attempt to talk to the ground person in that respect, because I've only been here for a couple of years now, full time, and I'd value input on a person that's actively irrigating and has some experience in that. But so in that, what I'm trying to say is I'd like to talk to the ground person and see what it is right now, if there's anything, if there's any, or if it's just kind of like, eye to ground, does it need water? They turn it on, that sort of thing.
I'm happy to help you work on that, Don. Not to brag, but we have some great turf in town.
We do, and I like to keep it that way. One last little footnote on that Flagpole Park. I understand there might be a lift station in that vicinity and laterals. Do you know anything about that?
There are, I know that there are septic rings and lateral lines that service the Greenbox campus, the pantry, the other businesses there on Lake Street.
Is that anything that needs to be considered for that irrigation? Is
No.
it? Okay. Okay.
No, it's all vaulted containment, which has, as far as I know, regular inspections, and it shouldn't change anything that we're doing on turf.
Okay.
Okay, we good with that one? Okay, next is dead tree removal. And that's just not high on my list. I think that fire mitigation might be more interested in dead tree removal.
Rebecca? There
So-
is one dead tree that comes to mind, and it's at Gazebo Lake, probably with a high
Oh,
pedestrian exposure, but it's a cottonwood. They're next
Okay.
to the main road.
what do you recommend we do with it?
Cut it down.
Okay, would you put that, is it critical? Is that as high on our list as irrigation is?
Yeah, for public safety concern, it's definitely high on my list.
Okay, okay.
I'm happy to get some competitive bids and refer that onto the Board of
Um,
Trustees to get it off of our list.
I'm liking it, Jesse.
Okay.
Okay. Next is rodent and goose control at the lake. I'm not really sure what to do about this, so I'm open to any input.
I can give some background. When Historic Green Mountain Falls Foundation donated the sod at the lake, we hired a pest control company to come in and do some spraying to protect that sod. And it was quite expensive. I want to say that it was around $600 per application. The chemicals that they used did not hurt the geese. They made the geese not want to feed on the roots of the grass. This is what we use at the Greenbox property and at the Lakeview Terrace, where we have those nice lawns. And that chemical is purchased through Amazon and applied weekly by historic staff. So it is it's definitely something that Public Works could do. I'm happy to pass on the information about that to the Board of Trustees for Public Works. Again, it may have got lost in Public Work turnover.
Thank you.
Jesse?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want some, I have, I've discussed this extensively among my friends over the last couple of years. And it's not a popular, subject to talk about just because I am a nature lover, and many people in town are. But conceptually, when you mix a quasi nature preserve with public park, they don't go together. And so I think for those that are advocating leave the geese alone, one has to make a decision on what the use of the land needs to be, and then go in that direction, because I don't, to mix them is, as we know, would be quite difficult indeed, if not impossible. So in that light, you know, my personal opinion would be the use, to dedicate it to the use of as a public park, and not try to make it a nature preserve, you know, for the geese or deer or whatever the animals are.
I agree with you, Don. I know it's not a popular subject to discuss. I wonder if there's some liability to the town about, you know, children playing in the grass that's covered in goose droppings. And that can't be a healthy environment for our children and park visitors. So I think it's a tough subject.
I think that, you know, identifying the use of the land as a public park versus a nature preserve, you know, if there's, you know, any, if there's any way that, you know, to console the nature lovers in the town, you know, to set aside some other part in the city, you know, that we could call it a nature preserve where the, you know, geese would have free roam of it, you know, might be kind of a long-term solution to the project. So.
Yeah, and I will say, Don, that historically when the town was having it professionally sprayed, they did the turf zone and left the rest for the geese, and the geese seemed to move over to the other areas of the lake that weren't being treated. So that was sort of the happy medium that was reached.
Are you still at that level? Because if anybody's done a lap around the lake, you know, when you go into the geese territory.
No, I don't think the park has been treated now in 2 years.
I mean, would you still try to delineate that, or just make the whole area geese free?
That's a tough answer. That's a tough question to answer. I mean, I enjoy seeing the geese there, and I think that based on projects that I've done in the park, we definitely have some goose loving folks in town who would be upset if we ran the geese away from the entire park. And that's been my experience of doing art installations down in that park for, you know, the last decade.
I agree. I mean, that's why, you know, trying to find another place for the geese to go for our town might be a good long-term solution.
Clay is here. Welcome, Clay.
Rebecca, am I late? I thought we were starting at 7.
Nope, 6, Clay.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I misread that. I thought we were at 7.
Quite all
I've just
right.
been sitting here waiting, so I apologize for not being here on time.
Oh, I'm glad you showed up. That's quite all right. If you got my email that I sent, I'm kind of organizing everything because there was quite a bit to cover tonight. We're down to the rodent goose control on the email.
Okay.
Did you get it?
Yes, I did. A lot easier to go through with all of it.
Yes, you did. Good.
I got in on a little bit of the
Yeah.
road.
I don't think we're going to come to any consensus on rodent. Okay, we didn't discuss rodent control at all yet.
As far as the rodents that I was talking about, were all of the gophers. Have you talked about gopher control? a little bit, or?
We have not. No.
I don't know if you guys realize what the gophers are doing, that everywhere when you walk through the parks and you see all the dirt that has been dug up and the big piles of dirt everywhere, that's all caused by the little ground gophers that we have there. And if you get in there and trap them out, it's not that complicated to do. I've caught quite a few of them on my property with just a simple little trap that cost about $7 or $8. And it can be done fairly easy with just a little time and effort. But before we can do anything, I feel before we do anything in the parks as far as grass, if we don't get the gophers under control, they just ruin it. I don't know if any of you have walked around the parks and seen any of the damage, but if you just walk around the parks and look, there's piles of dirt from the gophers everywhere. So that's just was my concern when I was writing this down, is trying to control those gophers.
So Clay, the way that we've been sort of handling this list so far tonight is everyone is taking some ownership of each one of those. And so since you seem to know the most about gophers, maybe you could come up with a maintenance plan that we could pass on to Public Works through the Board of Trustees with a suggestion on what to do about rodent control.
You bet. I'll write something up and get it to, I guess I'll send it to you, Rebecca, about the gopher control, and I would volunteer to do that. There's a little bit of technique in trapping those gophers, and I've been trapping them for years, and I wouldn't mind doing that. But the town also has a law that you can't have traps in town. And I talked to the marshal about that, and I think that the law goes back to the days of people trapping beaver or muskrat in the lake or whatever
Clay?
with the old traps. But if the town agrees to it and I won't get in trouble for setting traps in the park, I would be more than happy to take that on myself. Yes. I'm losing my video. There we go.
Okay, but first it needs to go to the Board of Trustees, of course.
Correct.
Okay.
Are you talking about,
We don't know.
Yeah, Don?
are you talking about kill traps or live traps?
They're kill traps. You can bury them in the ground. You dig up where the gophers are traveling back and forth, put the traps in the ground, cover them up with a board, and you can't even tell that they're there. Then you have to come back and dig them up and to get them out. But they are kill traps. Yeah.
Okay, so you'll take that on.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think we have a decision on goose control, but that's rather a hot topic, and we're not going to come up with a solution to that, I don't believe.
I will send the deterrent information to Board of Trustees so that they know what to use if they choose to do so.
You know, one other thing on the goose control.
Perfect.
One thing on the goose control too are swans. If you go on the internet and can Google swans, if you have a couple of swans, they're very aggressive, and if people use them, if you brought like 2 swans in, they would keep the geese away. Early in the spring, before the geese start nesting, if you had the swans there, or even swan decoys, that when the geese start coming in, they know that the swans are more aggressive and they don't come around. Plus, you would still have some swans in your lake that the people that are like the geese and the swan, or the geese there, you could keep them happy, but not have. This summer we had 23 of them down there most of the summer. If we only had 2 or 4
Okay, Clay,
swans,
let me
you would
interject.
still have yes, ma'am.
Could you send this information to the Board of Trustees?
Yes. Do you want me to send it
Okay.
to the trustees or to you, Rebecca?
Jesse, what are you doing? Are you bringing it to the next, or are you sending it to me in the PRT committee, or are you sending it to the trustees?
If it serves the committee, you can send stuff to me. I don't know how, I've just been trying to observe the committee so far. But I think, do you guys have a formal secretary?
You.
Yeah, I was going to say,
We go.
yeah.
Okay.
That would
So
be you.
in that regard, let's just use me as the bridge between the committee and the board of trustees. I'll forward whatever you guys want onto them for future packets. I put the
Okay.
packets together, so I'm probably the right person to
Perfect.
send this stuff to.
Perfect.
Okay.
And it would be not a violation of sunshine laws to forward it to the group.
So in this case, there's a interesting email caveat trick you can do to avoid violating or possibly violating sunshine laws is if you're going to send stuff to the entire group, do it as a blind carbon copy. And so no one can see who else received what's being sent out, even though it's obviously implied in the email that everybody's receiving this. It doesn't open the email chain to discussion. And so in that regard, you guys could forward stuff to me directly. That's no big deal. And then if the group is forwarding me things, do it via a blind carbon copy to avoid that. I know it's ridiculous, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I would like everyone to know, I would like Dawn to know what I have sent to you as a recommendation.
Certainly.
I would like Rebecca to know, I'd like Clay to know, so that we're not, I'm not leaving a committee member in the blind.
Well, I would
I
assume
agree.
any recommendations sent my way are committee decisions, not individual member decisions. I wouldn't do anything with those other
Correct.
than forward those back to the committee in the first place.
Then should our policy be to send those to Rebecca and then have the board sign off of them before they go to the board of trustees? That's probably better.
Whichever the committee prefers. Fine with both.
Dawn, what do you think?
I'm thinking that, yeah, you know, my personal preference is knowing what information is being sent on in committee name to the trustees.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll send those to Rebecca then until the group approves them going to board of trustees.
Agreed?
Okay. So
Okay.
any correspondence I'll send to Rebecca.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can I, for being late again, I apologize. Can we back up to the park names? I had a couple suggestions there I'd like to talk about.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. The pool park is located on land that was historically Gaylor's livery stable was there first. And the property, the Gaylors, G.G. Gaylor was here, and then his son, Lynn Gaylor and Les Gaylor, and they were here through the early 1900s. They owned up across the highway, almost to Cristola, all of what is the Mount Dewey property that the historical Green Mountain Falls now owns, was all owned by G.G. Gaylor and family. The property where Goody lives now was owned by the Gaylors, and it came clear down into Green Mountain where the park is now. And one of the houses there next to the old house by the park that's all Gaylor's original property there. And I'd like to see that named something after some of our original people that were here. If we're looking for a name for the park, I'd like to entertain that it's called Gaylor Park or Gaylor's Old Gaylor Livery Park. I have a picture. I have one picture in my possession that I've never seen it anywhere else that shows the Gaylor livery stable right where the swimming pool is. And then I have another picture, which I think is in some of the historical pictures of, they call it the Old Red Barn, that was there before the Gaylors got it. So I would like to see that park named Gaylor's Park, and then, or Gaylor Livery Park. We could do maybe do a little signage down there to recognize some of our pioneers with some old pictures of the park. I mean, we have the old pictures of the livery stable, and I have a picture in the 1930s of the Gaylor livery stable with an anvil, a big anvil, like a 350, 400 pound anvil. And I own that anvil, and I wouldn't mind donating it if we put that into the park in some sort of a little recognition of the park. But I would like to do something for the Gaylors, the people that own all that property. Are
Okay, so
pioneers
what
for
I
the town.
what I can do, Clay, is to put that on our list under parks, and we will prioritize that later, okay?
Yeah, I will go ahead and send you the pictures and do a little write-up just so you can sort of understand,
Okay,
see where I'm
Okay.
coming from with some of this. Thank you.
okay. You're welcome. Next item is bear-proof trash containers. I'm guessing we need more. Clay, I believe that was yours.
Yeah, we have right now, I know of only 3 of them around town. There's one down by the porta potty that doesn't work on the swing sets in Gazebo Lake Park. And then there's another one down at the other end by the old land office. And then there is one next to the tennis courts, which is out of the way. And I don't think it gets a lot of use. Actually, we could probably place that one someplace else closer to where all the hikers park and get better use out of the one trash can that the town already has. But I think we definitely need more trash cans scattered around town. You can't expect all the hikers in town they need a place to throw the trash, and we don't have hardly any trash receptacles anywhere. So I think we need to get some more of them, and then we can find, a place. I think they need to be placed where the hikers are going to be parking more. And then possibly some
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of that. Okay, so that will go on our list, bear-proof trash cans.
Rebecca, I noticed that Jonathan Kane has joined the meeting. I don't know if it would be out of protocol to do that presentation and then come back to our list.
I would not be breaking protocol. I think we need his information. Matt? Oh, Mr. Kane?
Hello, everyone. Are you ready for me to start?
Hello. Yes, please.
Okay, I have met a couple of you on Zoom and in real life. And so what I was thinking is I wanted to kind of gauge what you are looking for. I have my presentation that I have generally been giving to people, and I'm happy to give it to you. I'm also happy to do a question and answer thing, or if there's a specific question you have, do that, or just kind of talk to this parking project that we have going on right now.
I believe we primarily want to hear about parking and signage.
Okay, I'm going to hold off on my presentation, but I have it. So if you'd like to see it, I'm happy to share it. My name is Jonathan Kane. I'm the Assistant City Administrator in Idaho Springs. I also work for Economic Development for Clear Creek County. And I was hired as a consultant by Green Mountain Falls to work the town through an engagement process and to develop a plan for parking and signage. Both issues, as I'm sure you're all aware, have been problematic over the last few years. Parking has become more congested in town for a number of reasons. And signage, a lot of people have shared with me that they think that a more consistent signage is required in town and perhaps something a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And so we've been looking at both issues for the last several months. We started our process with a stakeholder group meeting, which some of you participated in. It was primarily put together from people like yourselves, other residents of town, business owners, and we just kind of started by talking about parking in Green Mountain Falls and what signage and parking might look like. We followed that with a survey that has been running. It just ended today, actually. We received 179 responses to that survey, which for a town the size of Green Mountain Falls is really great. That's a good number of responses. Results will be shared. I have to go through them. In general, I think that a majority of people in town support the town of Green Mountain Falls doing something to manage parking in some way. And most people in town support having a paid parking program. Now, I want to kind of start my comments on paid parking by saying that there's no alternative that's been determined by the town. There's still a lot of planning to be done. And what my intention is to take the survey responses and come up with some alternatives based on the conversations I've had with people. I've done a lot of stakeholder interviews. I think I've done nearly 30 of those. And we also had the community forum at a recent trustee meeting. And so we've got quite a bit of engagement at this point to start putting together some alternatives that the town can look at. One, of course, would be paid parking. There's some other alternatives that have been suggested, which I will also put out there. One is that maybe another enforcement agent is hired by the town and there's just more enforcement of parking rules that are broken. We've come to find that there's a need for a dedicated parking plan in town that dictates where certain kinds of parking activities happen. And that's something that I can provide to the town as well. You know, just a framework based on what I'm told by everyone. And then the other thing is just with the signage. We've noticed that there's two kinds of signage that need to be addressed. There's your kind of run-of-the-mill street sign that just is directional in nature, like 17th Street or whatever. Those signs really need to make sure they're safe and follow Department of Transportation standards. But there's a whole other kind of sign, which is wayfinding signage, which I know that some of you in this room have worked on as well. That should be beautiful and aesthetically pleasing and harkening back to the old days of Green Mountain Falls, similar to the wooden sign that you have by the lake. That is something that is beloved by your community. I've been told that almost universally, that kind of look and appeal is something that a lot of people find really important. And so basically what I have done to this point is gather just engagement about these topics to see what people think about how we should do these things. I'm not gonna lie to you, nobody likes paid parking. It's not something that you want to do. But that being said, it provides for a lot of good things in your community. It can make life easier for residents, make it more easy to access community assets like the church or restaurants or whatever, you know, kind of things people need to do in their daily lives that are likely impossible, maybe not impossible, but are difficult on weekends in the summertime now. And, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do that just make for a good experience. So I think what I'd really like to do is just kind of open myself to questions if you have any. If you have any specific questions about Idaho Springs program, we're a very similar community in a lot of ways. I know there's some size differences and we're right next to I-70, but we're both by major feeder highways and see a lot of tourist traffic. And so I think there's a lot of similarities. I can tell you about my experiences. If you have anything that you want me to make sure I reflect in my report, I'm happy to do so. And I'm also happy to meet with any of you one-on-one to discuss your concerns about the program or what may happen in the future. The last thing I want to say before questions, in the survey, if any of you took that, one of the questions related to trails, and specifically, actually there's more than one, but the specific question that seems to be a concern is we had talked about potentially consolidating trailheads. This was based on a conversation that I had with the stakeholders that were identified this fall. And what we realized is a lot of the trails are accessible from multiple points. And so with the success of your ambassador program that you had this summer, we had talked about two ideas. One would be potentially a virtual trailhead that would greet visitors to town, maybe in the vicinity to the swimming pool, where the ambassadors could work and there would be maps and signages and maybe an access point to get into the trail point system built through the greenway space there that connects to the lake or something to that effect. That's not necessarily something that has to happen. It was just decided or thought that maybe something like a visitor center kind of approach might be a good thing. Because one question that seems to come up a lot is where is the waterfalls or things like that. And people may hike up a road like Hondo and not understand how steep it is and get to the top where the trail starts and have a lot of trash. We've heard a lot about pedestrian vehicle conflicts on those residential streets and things like that. And so the thought was, can we reduce any of that? I am not sure your community supports that. That may be something that could happen in the future. But the interesting thing is we do see some conflicts at the residential areas where the trailheads are with trash and things like that. Kind of, Mr. Gafford, to your point about the bear-proof trash cans, that may be an easy fix to that problem. Also, this kind of pedestrian vehicle conflict that can happen on some of those steep roads. And, you know, we all know that when people come to Colorado, they're not always prepared for altitude. And so resources that might help them in those cases may be something that could be looked at. But I think for the scope of our project right now, the best thing to do would be to think about improving those spaces, reducing resident impacts from people trying to get into the trail system to make it as easy as possible for for them, make signage beautiful and accessible to people. And then if we can find a way to manage parking, to do that. And so that's why the paid parking thing is in the conversation. Do you guys have any questions for me or any comments or anything that I can provide you specific information about?
I have a question, Jonathan. I know when the survey came out, there was some confusion about what consolidation of the trailheads meant, and maybe some fear that we were trying to reduce the number of trailheads. But I think, I just wonder if through the survey process, you feel like your actual goal of doing something like the virtual trailhead at Pool Park, is that widely understood, do you think?
No, and that's my fault. When I said consolidate the trailheads, I thought that was clear on that point. I 100% agree about the trails. I think that was the concern. And so we got to the point in the engagement process. I mean, the best laid plans of mice and men, and I'll take full responsibility for that question being confusing to folks. When I've had one-on-one interviews, I have discussed that with people. And once they understand what we're talking about, a lot of people are very supportive of that idea. I think that may be something that is worth doing just in general, especially as you grow into a program in the future. You know, consolidating services and making sure people understand, this is the wrong word to use, but when you think about Disney World, it's an integrated experience. Everything is controlled for you and you have pathways and you know where to go to eat, you know where to go to access trails. That kind of approach to something like trails in Green Mountain Falls might be very useful just because everything is spread out. And even if people come to the, to the visitor center or the, whatever we call it, virtual trailhead, and then disperse to other points, but they know where they're going, they know where they should park, that could be a huge benefit to the town. But yeah, I 100% agree. I worded that question and people didn't fully understand what we were talking about. And that was a mistake by me.
Yeah, and let me make sure that I have a clear understanding. So you're suggesting the virtual trailhead is the destination of hikers where they would meet the trails ambassadors, where they would have use of the restrooms at the pool building, where there's trash receptacles and they can get information about where the waterfalls are and where the actual trailheads are.
Correct.
Okay.
In the future, with like future art projects and things like that that may occur, it would be a great resource for you to have to just consolidate things in general and make it easier to manage. I have talked to several of your ambassadors, and I think the concern is just volunteer burnout is what I've heard in the past. I think you got some really great people that are doing that work, but it can be, I think that's got to be a tough job just because of, the congestion. And maybe that last summer was an outlier with COVID, but likely you're still going to see increased use of that trail system. So something to consolidate it and just make their lives easier would be, I think, a great thing in general.
And I could just speak to the trail ambassadors because I volunteered and heard directly the feedback from them about what happened over the summer. And I would say of the people who came to the trainings and then went out and volunteered for shifts, the majority of people are hikers. So, they wanted to engage with people on the trails. There are very few people who actually wanted to be sitting in a parking lot, stationary, just greeting people. Although some people did incorporate that into their sort of daily hike for a short amount of time. We have a very low number of volunteers currently. There are maybe about 8 who volunteered on a regular basis. We did get some people who said that they might be interested in manning a station because they weren't big hikers. But again, of the people who actually kind of followed through with the orientation and the training and then actually signed up for shifts, they were all primarily hikers. And so our thought currently was for volunteer retention was to kind of just maintain the fewest amount of burdens on the volunteers by having them greet people where they felt the most comfortable. That's probably going to be a combination of greeting people by the lake and then primarily when they're hiking themselves.
I agree. I will say that one thing that I think you should consider is that you should control the experience that people have when they come to town. Volunteers are wonderful people and they work hard and they should be appreciated to the maximum extent possible. And I understand that with Green Mountain Falls' current financial situation, it would be difficult to hire even staff just to man a station like that. but the impacts that we're seeing to residents in Green Mountain Falls that I can document from the survey are relatively high. And I think that from the perspective of community good, it may be something to consider. Is there a way to encourage there to be somebody at a centralized location that can make sure that people understand that when they walk up Hondo, they're walking past people's homes, and that their impact on those people, while they're definitely welcome and they're a part of the Green Mountain Falls economy, and that everyone wants those visitors, their respect to the residents is also important. And so having somebody at a centralized location like that could potentially make sure that, you know, like when I say I come to town, I've been coming to Green Mountain Falls since I was a little kid, but say I haven't been there in a while. I have 2 little girls. I want to go maybe fishing in the pond and then go on an easy little walk or something, but make them feel like they're hiking. Where do I go to do that? How do I know what to do? How do I know what my experience should be for what I'm looking for? And I'm not trying to suggest that you need to make this into a, you know, 9-to-5 job, but I am saying that when you have trails that impact, that have all these different impacts, it could be a really good idea to think about setting up some parameters for how that volunteer program might look. Or potentially, if you do decide to enact a paid parking program, or maybe do more increased citations for people who are parking outside the regulations of the town, maybe it would be possible to use those funds to incentivize this ambassador program to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Again, that's a decision for y'all to make. I will tell you, and that's what we've done with our trail system. We have a mountain bike trail system we're building. We have a patrol, and one of the benefits of the patrol is you get free parking, and you also get a free pass on the gondola we're constructing to get into the trail system. And so there are some benefits attached to that, which, you know, is not the same for Green Mountain Falls for sure. But it's definitely worth thinking about. How do you want a visitor to act when they come to town? Do you want to encourage them to buy a beer? Do you want to encourage them to have breakfast before they hit out in the trails? This kind of approach to the trails could potentially impact the economy of the town if done correctly, and be a really welcoming gateway into town as well, which I think is something I've also heard, is that welcoming visitors to town is really important, and making sure when they come, they feel like they're having a unique and real experience.
Yeah, I think that we could identify some high demand times where that would, you know, be critical to have maybe that stationed, and then also think about what that station looks like when it's unmanned.
I have found a really cool kiosk thing that I was going to suggest in my report. I'm just bringing it up now. Kiosks are expensive, like digital ones. They can cost anywhere for $16,000 to buy like a run-of-the-mill side of the road thing, you know, up to $5,000 a year for a really fancy and beautiful thing. You can also kind of duct tape one together with PowerPoint and a big monitor. But that is another approach that could be taken that I think would fit, where you can kind of have peak times where you have a person, off peak times, maybe you can create a really good, well curated video and pictures, and you know, some kind of interactive experience, just so people know where they're going, what to expect, you know, bring water, those kinds of things.
Sounds good. Thanks for
Anybody else have any
discussing that,
questions?
because the, you know, the managing the Trails Ambassadors program is part of our scope. And so I appreciate you talking about that.
Jesse, is that a land office that their current office is in, that historic building on the far side of the lake? Or it's some kind of historic building there, that small shack kind of thing?
Yeah, it's called the land office, and I think the only time it's used right now is the UPass Historical Society sets up on Saturdays and has some calendars and talks about history there.
Okay.
Yeah,
I had
currently,
thought that might be another. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, currently the ambassador program really has no home. I mean, I have the shirts and buttons in my house currently, but we're currently homeless. So we're trying to find a centralized place that we can all access materials and maps and things like that. So we're also open to suggestions for that.
You have a wonderful staff of volunteers, and I definitely want to make sure that that's forefront of what I'm saying. Every single one of them that I spoke to was just really nice and wonderful, and had a lot of great ideas about how the program could be better. And, you know, just make sure that you guys are supported as well as you can. We even talked about things like maybe, being a part of the ambassador program gets you access to CPR and first aid and wilderness kind of survival and things like that, just as an added bonus that's not particularly expensive to administrate, but might actually add a bonus to the town too in the future.
Anne has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anne, I'm sorry. Unmute yourself, Anne. Unmute.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Good.
This is so interesting, and I'm very interested, but it just occurred to me, do you see any problem with the fact that we have two entrances into Green Mountain Falls? People who come up U-Pass are going to turn in that way first. And how do we get them not to do that? They'll come in and go up a road or something there. It's really, I don't know. I just thought of that. I'll stop.
That gets back to Jesse's point a little bit too. I think that we need to make sure there's something for all times. There's never going to be the capacity to meet everyone exactly where they are, but we can design an experience that kind of funnels people to locations, and we can do that in two ways. Number one, we can improve upon this. I'm not saying improve upon, that's the wrong word, but we can build out an experience on the city website and on all the associated kind of stakeholder websites that's similar and branded in the same way, and maybe an interactive map that kind of has some ways that people can interact and do the things that they need to do to figure out their trip. That can be a really helpful tool for a tourist kind of perspective. And I think for like your Colorado Springs visitor or from points further, that's a really great way to start. And then, when you're coming into town, there's a couple of places where wayfinding signage could go a long way, a welcome to Green Mountain Falls kind of thing. We talked about down by the fire station and just kind of building something there, maybe in conjunction with them that has information and just a beautiful, welcoming kind of thing. The other thing is that once you get kind of into town, you kind of do get funneled in towards the lake a little bit. So there should be some kind of signage at the lake or nearby that kind of directs people to what they're doing. That's why I kind of had differentiated between wayfinding signage and like standard street signs. One of the things that came up in the survey quite a bit and in the stakeholder meeting is that there's sign pollution in Green Mountain Falls. People feel like things are just not standardized. You guys have a really great thing. The CARES Act paid for you to get a new signage machine to build, your average stop signs, things like that. That reduces the cost for you to build plain signs, I'll call them, dramatically, like probably 50% or more. And so I think that one thing is that'll kind of take care of itself as the signage plan gets developed and we figure out where the best places for stop signs are or whatever signs you guys need for just following the law kinds of things. That frees you up for wayfinding. You guys have an artistic community there that is really talented, that can create beautiful signage. And there happens to be a program through the Department of Local Affairs that pays for wayfinding signage. I am about to actually apply for one through CDOT as well. It's called the Revitalize Main Street program. And Matt, I don't know if you've seen it. It's a good one for you guys to look at too. I'm going to build an archway in Idaho Springs. Archways are about $60,000, but that's conveniently what this grant pays for. And you can use this grant to establish placemaking and Main Street activities. I think it's a really good opportunity. They just opened a new round of funding. And I think, even for general wayfinding signage and this idea of, the beautiful Green Mountain Falls signage that welcomes people to your town, creates a sense of place, and guides people to the trails, this program could be ideal. I know you can get anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, so it's not a huge amount of money for a grant, but for signage, that's probably at least 2 or 3 really big, like landmark kind of signs, or maybe some smaller signage that you want to do around town or refurbishing or whatever the case may be. And so I guess that's my answer, is I would take a 2-pronged approach. I would make sure that when people come or looking up my town to come to the town or exploring the trails, there's really accessible online information to get there. And then once they come to town, I would pick a couple key strategic spots where I would put some of those wayfinding signs and say, hey, come check out our visitor center or whatever you guys decide to call it. Or if you don't do that, here's a great place to park where you can go get, pancakes before you head out for a day on the trails or whatever the case may be. I think that there's some opportunities just with the way the town is built. Excuse me.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
Are you guys interested?
Is everybody okay? Any questions? Go ahead.
I was going to just ask, are you interested in talking about the paid parking idea at all? Because I know that's kind of a controversial topic. It's something that I think a lot of people have very strong feelings about what happens in Manitou. And I really just want to keep saying what happens in Manitou doesn't have to happen in Green Mountain Falls, no matter what. In Idaho Springs, everybody always says we're not Breckenridge, and you're not Manitou Springs. You're Green Mountain Falls, and you've been Green Mountain Falls for a long time, and you should stay Green Mountain Falls. In the Board of Trustees meeting, I made a comment that somebody had said, asked me kind of a pointed question and said, isn't paid parking bad for business? And I replied that it was a myopic view of paid parking. And it is, because paid parking is a context sensitive thing. Everybody builds the program that works the best for them. There's good programs and there's bad programs, but there's a reason that it's still here. Business owners tend to like paid parking once it's implemented. And I think for Green Mountain Falls, you could implement something that would basically prioritize business that is shorter. So you could figure out, for instance, in Idaho Springs, we figured out what our average trip stay length is, and we made that very cheap. So it's like less than $5 to stay for 4 hours right now. And that can change at any time. You could do that for 6 hours or whatever an average hike is, or whatever you guys want to do. You could do something like where if you go to breakfast, you get free parking for the rest of the day. You could do parking passes. You can do a lot of things, but the thing with paid parking to remember is it can pay for a lot of the capacity that Green Mountain Falls needs right now. It could be another staff member. You just got a new clerk who's awesome, by the way, and I think I'm very excited for his new role, I have to say. You know, but maybe you could get another parking enforcement person, or you could get more ambassadors, pay those ambassadors. You know, there's always kids in the community that need jobs, and that's a great way to give a kid a job. Maybe people to keep up the park. Other funding things that it could do, maybe you build another bathroom at the park and get rid of those porta potties forever. Just build something nice. We just put a modular bathroom into our town using parking revenue. I've looked at your parking kind of situation, and I have a model that I use to figure out kind of like what different price points might generate. I really think that with really, really minimal amounts of charging for paid parking out of the 400 spots that you have, you could likely generate gross revenue in the range of $80,000 to $150,000, just depending on how you set it up. That money could go a long way for paving roads, maybe making better access to the trail system, maybe putting bear-proof trash cans all through town, whatever the case may be that you guys think you need. It's a revenue source that it's not amazing, but it's also significant in a way. We also, in the survey, one other question I just wanted to clarify, we had asked about nearby community folks that maybe don't live in the town limits. I know that it's confusing where the town limits in Green Mountain Falls is for people who maybe haven't been there quite as long. There's a lot of you know, just things you have to know about where that kind of stuff is. In Idaho Springs, we gave free parking to everybody in Clear Creek County because the same situation, we're the kind of the center of the county. People come from 20 miles away and think they're from our city. And it really has had no effect. All it has done is enforce our community and make us stronger and more unified as a group. You know, we're not shy to say that we put the onus for that revenue generation on tourists. Most of our money is tourism related. We have sales tax and we have parking money, and then, you know, things like marijuana and alcohol, which typically are tourism driven as well. That's where we get our money in our city. We try to keep that onus off our residents as much as possible. And I think we still create a fairly welcoming community too. I think people still come. We had our best sales tax numbers ever last year during the pandemic. We had an outdoor marketplace, which we were able to create because of the parking revenue, which had music and art and people drawing in chalk and doing murals on the sidewalk and all that kind of stuff. It was really great.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you for the presentation. I think we're going to have to end it soon because I'm about at the end of my tolerance for Zoom meetings.
Sure.
I know we haven't covered everything tonight, and I'm at a neighbor's house because I don't have Wi-Fi currently, so I don't want to impose on them any longer than we can. We need to discuss trails, but it's such an important topic. I want to do it when I have more energy. If that's okay with my fellow TRT meeting. PRT guys? Is that okay? Jesse, Don?
I'd love to come back if I had an opportunity. I will be going through the survey results and drafting a report based on the engagement that we have generated to this point. I'd love to come share it with you when you have time to see me. And I can provide that in advance so you have something to look at before you talk at me, or before I talk at you, either way.
Yeah, it would be great if you could come back for our
Perfect.
next meeting, I think.
That
Okay,
would be good.
well, thank y'all.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, John. Have a good one.
Jesse, Don? Can we continue this? Clay, I'm sorry. I forgot you were there. Can we continue this next time?
Are you proposing that we meet again in 2 weeks?
Yes, I am.
I'm okay with that.
2 weeks at our regularly scheduled 6 p.m. meeting, okay? Don?
Sounds good to me. I'll be here on time this time.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Don, is there anything urgent tonight, or can we talk about it in 2 weeks?
We can talk about it in 2 weeks.
Madam Chair,
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Madam Chair,
Sir,
uh,
Mr. Bratton.
the mayor wants to avoid having all the meetings in the first week of the month. So she wants the meeting staggered. So I don't know what you mean by meeting in 2 weeks. That'd be the first week of the month.
And this is Deani. I can clarify that. I think what the mayor was referring to is making sure that there was ample time to communicate in between the Board of Trustee meeting that typically happens once a month, and to kind of get feedback from the committees so that there's time to communicate and digest the things that are going on. I think the fact that you're having this meeting now kind of fulfills that requirement, and I don't see any issue with you having a meeting the same week, as their meeting, based on the amount of stuff that you need to cover. That's just kind of my take on what she had mentioned, and my feeling with how things are evolving with this committee.
Yeah, I would concur with Deani on that one.
Good. So same time, 2 weeks. Please send me any items you would like to have on the agenda, and we will try to get the agenda posted three days, hopefully, prior to the meeting, so that you have ample time to review all the paperwork that may be present. Is that acceptable? Perfect.
Sounds great.
We have lots of work to do. I'm sorry we couldn't get through everything tonight, but we will next time. And if you could, review the comprehensive plan 101, 104, so that any of those items can get on the agenda and we can discuss them.
That's great.
Okay?
Thank you, Rebecca,
Thank
so
you.
much for taking charge on this. You did a fabulous job tonight, so I just want to commend you on your work. Thank you, the rest of the committee as well.
Thank you. Does
I have a
anybody
question.
know
Has
what happened
anybody
to
heard
Goody?
anything from Goody?
No, that was my question. No, he disappeared.
Is he alive? Do we know is he alive and okay?
I've been out of town. I've not seen him. I've not seen him since November, but I've been out of town, so I don't know.
I can say that I have seen him posting on Facebook.
Okay, well,
but I have not heard anything from direct email from him.
Well, that answers that question.
okay,
Thank you.
He's still alive.
Well,
I'll
that's
continue
good.
trying to reach out
Just
to.
so you guys know, I call him and I email him. Yes, all the time. Okay, so see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
You're welcome, Dawn.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. You
Thanks.
too.
Good night. Bye.
Good job, Matt.